Okay. Hi everyone, and good evening. Tonight is a very hot topic because you all know, really, that when you want to use recreational drugs, when you want to relax, there's always a way to do that. Meditation, take a drink, smoke a joint, whatever. But tonight's guest is actually bringing a new, let's say, plateau to what it means to actually take cannabis, what it means to actually relax, get high. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce a very popular guest of mine and one that has been on my show for quite a bit, Phil Farber. Hello, Phil. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be on. It's been a while, and every time that you're on my show, it's always about a very deep topic. It's always cutting edge. And with the new passing of the laws for legalizing cannabis, it's only appropriate to talk about it, especially in this let's say this genre, this arena of getting high. So can you explain to me, what the hell do you mean about Cannabis Magick? Because the bottom line is that there's a lot of controversy about, using, marijuana, smoking a joint. Let's just, you take the floor.
Well, in terms of history, the controversy around cannabis is actually fairly recent. Through the ages, I mean, going back thousands of years, we have archaeological evidence going back at least 2,000 or 3,000 years showing that cannabis was a major tool of healers and shamans and magicians down through the ages. We have, they found just a couple of years ago the remains, the archaeological remains of a shaman in China, something like 2,500 years old, who had 2 pounds of cannabis with him, and apparently the tools and so on for using it in a ritual context. We also know something about some of the earlier peoples in Europe, for instance, the Scythians, who were around thousands of years ago, who were the ones who actually spread the use of the plant, the cannabis plant, for textiles and for ritual purposes, for medicine and for ritual purposes across Europe. The Scythians eventually became, where they said they were a nomadic people, where they eventually settled down. They became the Celts on one hand. They became the Ashkenazi Jews in other areas where they settled down. But we have some pretty good evidence that cannabis was a very important part of their culture and was used ritually throughout. We have actually one of the oldest records of the Scythians was the Greek writer Herodotus, who talked about their funeral rituals, which involved them going into a little tent where they would have a brass container full of hot stones that they would throw cannabis on, and the vapor would rise up and they would shout for joy and conduct their ritual. So really the controversy, the idea that cannabis is something unhealthy, that cannabis is an evil, nasty drug or something, really is only, maybe a century old, if that. It stems from time in the United States during the very first part of the 20th century, when there was the whole thing of prohibition of alcohol and so on. And when alcohol prohibition was repealed, there were vested interests in law enforcement, shall we say, who worked. It was really kind of a horrible racist, and I don't know, there were some pretty screwed up people who were around who worked to get cannabis illegal back then. One of the main things they did was they used a different name. They called it marijuana, which was the Mexican name. The doctors and so on who all used cannabis in their treatments back then called it cannabis tincture or cannabis indica. However, when the United States government made marijuana illegal and suddenly all the cannabis tincture was off the shelves, the doctors were like, what happened? Where's our medicine? So it was deceptive, and it was it was not a very good thing. You're going to remember that this is, again, an herb that's been in use for thousands of years, one of the most important herbs in the Ayurveda tradition, and so on. This is a powerful healing and ritual tool.
Well, let me ask you, because I do know that they use certain traces of cocaine, and you know, and also too, just different drugs and various pain killing methods when you're actually operating on someone. I've never heard of cannabis being used during an operation. So you're saying that it was at some point used in various medicines of the past?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, some of the things that it's used for, again, today in the medical marijuana state. It was used to treat asthma. It was used to treat eye problems. It was used to treat arthritis and autoimmune disorders and so on.
I see. Well, then why not just use it like they use penicillin? Penicillin, whereas they dilute it to a certain point, whereas that you have to get some type of prescription. What was the actual reason behind them not putting it on the shelves of the doctors? I mean, is it because the plant is so readily grown that the pharmaceutical companies felt that I mean, there has to be a reason why they took it off.
Well, they took it off largely because, well, see, the doctors had nothing to do with it. The doctors wanted it available. It was actually an over-the-counter medicine back then. You could walk into a pharmacy and buy a bottle of cannabis tincture up until 1937. And largely, there's a really good book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack Herrera, which documents the history of how cannabis became illegal. And largely, it was about greed and it was about racism. There were people like William Hearst, who owned all the newspapers back then, and who also owned the paper companies that made the newspapers. At the time, there was developed a new process for making hemp paper, which is very, very cheap.
Yes.
Hemp paper is way more durable than tree paper. It's a renewable resource, so it costs a lot less to make. But Hearst was invested in lumber, so all of his newspapers began running these stories about this evil drug and about how Mexicans and black people would give it to your daughters and corrupt them. And we saw that in movies like Reefer Madness, which was paid for by the government to spread this kind of propaganda.
Sure.
Until then, but the doctors did not know this was going on. They didn't know what marijuana was. They had cannabis tincture. And when it was made illegal and taken off the shelves, the doctors were like, where is it? This was our medicine. And they actually protested at the time, but it didn't get them very far. Now what we're seeing is that the pharmaceutical companies are scrambling to make cannabis-based drugs. And we are actually going to see some pharmaceutical versions. Well, there's one that's been on the market for a long time now, which is dronabinol, otherwise known as Marinol, which is synthetic THC.
Oh, okay.
And it doesn't really have very much medicinal value because it's missing all the other components of the plant, the various aromatic oils and so on. But that just came off patent. So now the pharmaceutical companies are scrambling to make cheaper versions of this and generic versions. The first one that we're going to see on the market is there's a company from England called GW Pharmaceuticals who are about to it's already approved in the UK and in Canada. It's about to be approved in the United States called Sativex, which is a whole plant extract. We're going to see some other ones from the pharmaceutical companies. They are working very hard to suppress the grassroots, as it were, medical marijuana, because there's going to be a whole lot of money in these products, in Sativex and the other whole plant extracts that they're working to bring out. That's a good thing if they do bring these out. I mean, there's people who need that medicine and would do well to get it. However, to suppress the grassroots use of what is basically a common herb of no more toxic or less toxicity than most of the herbal products that you can buy in the store.
Sure.
So on one hand, good thing that there's going to be some good quality pharmaceutical products made from cannabis. Bad thing that it may suppress the more grassroots end of that, and also will probably continue to make it difficult for people who use it for ritual purposes and recreational purposes.
I see. So let's go back to the reputation, the bad rap. Okay, people, getting high. I think Quentin Tarantino actually made one where who was it? Brad Pitt was getting high, and he just stayed on the couch the whole time. I forgot the name of that. True Romance or something. I can't remember what movie it was. But, all the movies that you do see, everything that the public or the media displays in reference to marijuana, hashish, weed, whatever, is quite negative. And people actually, people have died for this drug. People, go out in the streets and will do whatever. If it's for, purpose of medical usage, haven't people been abusing marijuana then? Because, there's a such thing as too much. Is there such thing as too much when it comes down to, smoking pot?
Well, on one hand, there is no lethal dose, or the lethal dose is so high that, you would have to, it would weigh more than you would. You would have to smoke more than your own body weight. You would hurt yourself just from smoke inhalation. Everybody's metabolism is different. I would say there's certainly people who abuse almost anything. There's people who watch too much TV or spend too much time on the internet, and so on. For the most part, there was a widely spread myth spread by the government, the United States government, some years ago, called the amotivational syndrome, which was the idea that pot would make you a lazy stoner who stays on the couch all day, and so on. But now, let's say, if we look around, actually, the real research into that, the demographics of seeing who does smoke pot and so on, is totally contrary to that. In general, in the United States, at any rate, pot smokers tend to have better jobs and better education than non-pot smokers. We have a president who was a heavy pot smoker at one time. It didn't stop him. There's plenty of famous people who, people like Richard Branson or Steve Jobs or so on, Willie Nelson, or people who work really hard and are known for doing that, who are cannabis users. And so the myth about that is, it's ridiculous. There's people who will use almost anything as an excuse to lie around. For the most part, many of the people who I know who have been involved in using cannabis for magical purposes find that it's actually kind of a motivator. There's some people just naturally who find that it actually helps them to focus rather than the stereotype that we have of the pothead who's very distracted and doesn't know or can't finish a sentence and so on. So everybody's a little bit different. What constitutes good, healthy use for one person may be unhealthy for another person. That's true of almost anything.
Sure. Phil, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Now, the bottom line is that we are talking about cannabis. We are talking about magic. We're talking about using it as enhancement, as a bridge in between here and there. But one of the things that people have to also realize is that we use this all the time. We use it in incense. We use it with amulets. We use it with whatever type of incantations that we want to use to evoke within our ritual. So one can't say that we don't use some type of outsourced element to get, what we need, what we want, what we aim to accomplish. But with cannabis, I struggle to really accept the fact that, do we really need it? Does one or should one actually even start off on that foot to do? Because when you're dealing with cannabis, you're dealing with a crutch, if you will. And I say that because why even use it in the first place if you have that innate ability to reach from here and there? If you have empowered yourself and trained yourself as a practitioner to use this within your ritual. And that is the biggest problem that I have, because I feel that, you should be able to do it without. But, of course, some people need that assistance. What's your take on that?
Well, I think you know that I'm a big proponent of open hand magic. Okay,
Yes.
that I generally do most of my magic without props and
yes,
assistant. I like being able to have magic I could do right now.
Yes, indeed. Right.
At any time. So in that case, it does sort of fall into that category. Like any other ritual tool, people can rely on it rather than being able to do the things themselves. However, in fact, there's a great diary entry, and I read this years ago, and I'm actually trying to locate this again now. So if anybody who's watching this can give me the reference on it, it would be great. There was a diary entry in Aleister Crowley's diary about how he was using hashish to do a particular ritual. And he was having fantastic success at the ritual, so much so that he had to stop using the hashish to decide whether the results he was getting was the magic or the drug.
I do recall that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in, I'm trying to remember the name of the book. There's actually a book out about Crowley and the art of doing a journal, something like that. I believe it's in there. I've been pulling out my books trying to figure out some of these references. So yeah, I mean, even Crowley had that, where he had to kind of separate it out a little bit. I do think that things like cannabis, again, it's not addictive. It's not, but people can become habituated to it. It's not, it's not particularly harmful in itself. So if somebody did use it regularly, they're not going to, if they rely on it all the time and that's what they're doing instead of doing magic, that's a problem.
Yes. Okay.
But if occasional use to take things up to another level and develop some new neural pathways that you can use again with or without the assistance of cannabis, I think that's a good use. I mean, there are groups of people who do use cannabis constantly for spiritual purposes. Shiva sadhus in India, for instance, or Rastafarians in Jamaica.
Sure.
Those guys, I mean, I remember years ago when I was an entertainment journalist and I would interview reggae musicians, and I would always ask them about, well, what's the place of cannabis in there? And they would always give me this lecture about how it was, it's a special thing that is used for the ritual purpose only, and we only do it with the spiritual intent. But then when I went and hung out with these guys, the spiritual intent was all day long. However, for them, that worked just fine. And in their culture, there's a work ethic attached to cannabis. In our culture, we have this idea that people who smoke pot are lazy, lie on the couch and eat potato chips all day. In Jamaica, there's a work ethic. It's like what we drink coffee for in the United States. Yeah. Over there, they expect people, we're going to work hard in the fields today. We have to have some cannabis. So it's kind of the opposite of what we expect, and it's kind of a cultural presupposition about what kind of effects happen that way. Anyway, yeah, people, certainly you want to be able to do your magic as magic. You want to be able to use occasional things, cannabis or psychedelics or whatever it is, to take things to another level, to learn a little bit more, maybe to get some insight into your situation, and then you can go back and do your magic however, at any time you want.
Okay. So what do you recommend for people who would like to start off and experimenting with smoking and reaching a higher state to whatever they're trying to do? Because I guess what I'm asking is, people may want to think that, okay, fine, I never thought to, include the two, because most people feel that are taught to, do ritual, and the ritual, some people are just, what is it, cookbook ritual people, they'll say, oh gosh, I cast the circle, and next thing you know, it doesn't say use reefer, doesn't say use this. So what would you recommend? What would you recommend to how to include this without, without going into a state of mistakes? Because you'll also have people who participate in evocation and invocation. So I would like you to also address that, because there's some areas that possibly people may not want to experiment with certain type of drugs, not necessarily marijuana, but certain type of drugs, because they may not be able to, they may not be in the state of the best state of receiving or dealing with what they may find on the other side, if you will.
Well, the first thing I would tell people is, if you're going to use any kind of enhancers, anything, a drug or a meditation technique or something like that to enhance your ritual, understand it thoroughly first, right? You need to know your magic, know your ritual down cold without any assistance, right? And you need to know what these enhancers are. If it's cannabis, you need to really understand what it's going to do to you and what kind of response you personally have to it before you combine it into a ritual context. So know your drug, know your ritual separately before you combine them. That's the first thing. The next thing would be, there's the idea proposed by Timothy Leary and his friends back when they were at Harvard.
Light waves, sound waves, light waves, open eyes, open mind, open your brain, learn how to send messages using electrons. Your brain loves light. Who controls your eyeballs? Programs your mind.
Genetic predisposition.
I see, okay.
For me, what I find is that in certain contexts, I find that it will enhance my ability to focus. It will and to concentrate. If I'm meditating, for instance, and I have just a tiny bit of cannabis, that my ability to maintain concentration will be hugely improved. I also noticed that for me, I've been practicing yoga for 30-something years now, and I can pretty reliably have Kundalini experiences during my practice when I choose to. I have found that if I add a little cannabis to that, having the Kundalini experience, first of all, becomes a lot easier to initiate, and it becomes a lot stronger as well. So that's interesting, and I do think that maybe there's some mechanism in the human body. We have an endocannabinoid system. We have internal chemicals that are much like the ones in cannabis. And some of them are in our spinal cord and our cerebrospinal fluid and so on. So I think maybe there's some link there that could be studied. It would be interesting to do some brain scan studies or something like that. Kundalini and cannabis. I don't even think they've done a Kundalini.
I don't think so.
Brain scan study alone would be interesting. I've also found that cannabis is very good, and this is actually traditional usage that goes back thousands of years. And one of the earliest writings about the use of cannabis was Emperor, I don't know, it was a Chinese emperor who wrote a book on using herbs. I mean, this is thousands of years ago. What he said was that it's used to bring joy, longevity, and good health, and the ability to communicate with spirits. Sure. So what I've found is that to do simple kinds of evocation, cannabis can be, small amounts of cannabis can be a very powerful assist to that. I also think that in some of the traditional, even goetic evocation, for instance, the traditional usage involved these big pots of burning incense that the medium would stick their face in and smoke themselves out. There are a number of psychoactive components to that, and cannabis may certainly have been one of them. But even things like frankincense and myrrh, which are more commonly used in those, are also psychoactive through inhaling the smoke. So there's definitely some traditional use in there, and cannabis was probably commonly a part of that mix as well.
Well, what about other aspects of natural resources such as peyote and other one? I'm quite sure there's many others out there. What is your prediction as to what may happen if they take it off? Because you cannot just go and use mushrooms, just to do it unless you belong to a certain tribe or something like that. And if the pharmaceutical companies really get their hands on it, and the government gets their hand on it, then no one will be able to grow it, because then it's going to be regulated, whereas that it's only going to be used prescribed. What is your take on how that should be handled, and how people could possibly help to not let that happen?
Well, I do think right now in the United States, there's a lot of momentum behind legalizing cannabis. Mm-hmm. And the recent polls show that for the first time ever in the United States, or the first time since 1937 or whatever, the majority of people are in favor of legalizing it, just outright legalizing it. Something like, last poll was like 52%, which is a pretty big breakthrough. And even higher in some of the states, California and Colorado and so on. So I think that right now there's a lot of momentum. People do need to continue to contact their legislators and so on. There's a lot less stigma to it now. Sure. And people are finding that they're less afraid to speak out about it. They are, even back in the day, I had a little trepidation about, writing a letter to my congressman, whatever, and say, are they going to come and track me down and say, this is a pro-cannabis person, and, whatever. Actually, my congressman here for many years was one of the people who every year introduced a bill into the U.S. Congress, not for the federal government to lay off of the medical marijuana states, to let them do what they want to do. He just retired because he was ill, so I don't know about our new guy. But people do need to, if that's the way you feel about it, contact your legislators. There's some really good. There's the Drug Policy Alliance online, who is an organization who organizes a lot of this. There's NORML, National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. All of their websites have resources where you can go and locate who your legislators are and so on, and what kind of bills are in process and that you can support and so on. That's what needs to happen right now in the United States. If the United States continues to legalize state by state, which is how, incidentally, how alcohol got re-legalized after prohibition. It was state by state until finally there were enough states and they could go federally and say it's time. When the United States has been putting pressure on the rest of the world to keep cannabis and other drugs illegal, it's our war on drugs that's been screwing things up in a lot of places on the planet, and so hopefully, if the United States can come up with some saner policies, some of the other countries, some of our allies will follow.
Yes, because I was just worried about that, because I thought it was a ploy for the government to put their hands into it and then to regulate it, whereas that no one will make money because they figured everyone else was making money, everyone else was having the fun, so they wanted in on it. So I that was that's my opinion. I don't trust the government, by far. So I'm all pro for people to be able to, at least, people can grow peppermint. Why not, cannabis?
Hey, people can grow a lot more dangerous herbs than cannabis. You could grow datura in your backyard. You could
yes,
grow,
indeed.
And in fact, it grows wild all around here. There's, sacred thorn apple.
Yes.
Is, and every year some kids pull some up and try it and get sick and go to the hospital and whatever. But it's perfectly legal. There's a dozen plants that grow wild in my backyard that I wouldn't want to smoke or eat or whatever. So it's really, again, these were greedy motives and so on, and nefarious motives that originally made cannabis illegal, when really it should be on par with other healing herbs and the other natural biological things that are part of our daily life.
Well, I know that you have a book or let's say a e-book type of thing that you have called Cannabis Magick, and you're selling that on eBay. Can you just lightly cover, without giving away too much, some of the topics that you cover in that publication?
Well, actually, what I have now is it's a DVD, which is it's about an hour and a half. A studio project I did some years back, probably, 6 or 7 years old now, that DVD, which guides the user through a number of different techniques involving cannabis. First and foremost, technique of how to access the state of being high, or the cannabis focus state, or whatever you want to call it, without using the cannabis. Using a hypnotic method. It also has on it information about how to use cannabis in a ritual context, and also in terms of meditation and using it to stimulate your chakras, and so on. So it guides the readers to some good psychedelic visuals and kind of a guided trance experience that takes people through it. I am presently working on a book. Which will be a much more complete guide to using cannabis and magic, which will likely be, I haven't signed the contract yet, but it will be for one of those major occult publishers that I write books for.
Now, is that legal, what you're doing? I know that seems like a stupid question, but is it legal to sell how you get high? And, I don't know. You surprised me, Phil, honestly, because I've never heard of anybody publishing something, hey, look, dude, this is how you do it. And it's not legal, but this is how you, do you even have references? Okay, fine, this is where you go find your dealer. I'm just kidding.
Well, we can't do those kinds of references.
Yes.
But actually, there is some precedent in terms of books on the subject. There's one that I highly recommend called Cannabis Spirituality by Stephen Gaskin. If anybody knows who Stephen Gaskin is, he was one of the, he's still around. He runs for president every now and then.
Yeah.
He was one of the original hippies who led a caravan of 200 school buses across the United States to found the farm community in Tennessee. And anyway, his book, Cannabis Spirituality, is a very good book. He comes from more of a Buddhist kind of Eastern point of view than a Western ceremonial magic point of view, but nonetheless, some very useful things in there. There's some other interesting books. Chris Bennett has some good books on the history of magical use of cannabis, which are very good, and so on. So if you go into any research, you'll find that there's some precedent. I'm not the first one to do this. However, actually, even Aleister Crowley wrote a little bit about it, although his better essays on the subject were all sort of in code.
Yeah.
What he called the sacred grass of the Arabs or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If you look in the Book of Thoth, there's a great essay about Under the Fool Card about the use of cannabis in doing divination. He also wrote a really good one under a pseudonym called The Psychology of Hashish, which is widely available on the internet. And he was actually very, he probably prided himself on being a scientist and a good observer. And his descriptions and his analysis of cannabis, even back then, was really spot on for the fact that he didn't have the chemical or neurological knowledge that we have today.
Yes. Okay.
So it's worth reading. He he talks about how the kind of influence that it has on his consciousness and the kinds of things he can do with it, and so on. So the pseudonym he wrote it under is Oliver Haddo. If you want to search online, but it is you'll find it under his name and archives of Crowley's writings online. It was in one of the Equinox volumes originally.
Okay. Well, so you have been very busy, and you have written so many books, and you've been into so many different publications. I had no idea though that you had actually appeared in High Times before. I mean, that is so
yeah. Back in the day, I was a freelance writer, and I did entertainment journalism, and I did mostly music coverage for High Times magazine for about 5 or 6 years in the 90s, and it was a fun gig. I would get to go and hang out with rock bands and so on, which was fun. But I also did some other interviews for them on more magical topics. One of the first ones I did for them was an interview with my old friend Robert Anton Wilson. Which was another high-profile go-getter, achiever, cannabis user.
Oh wow! Okay. Well, with that, I'd like to ask you something. How do I ask, dear Phil? Have you ever gone into a ritual with people on high?
Have I gone? Yeah, all the time, sure. More often than not. That's one of these assumptions of that the debate about legalization here has taken a weird twist in that people assume that if you're a cannabis user, well, you're always high.
No, but you're not. Exactly.
He's a pothead, so he's always going to be high. But in general, cannabis users are much like alcohol users or anything where, it's not constant. You do it on the weekends or after your work is done or for a specific purpose. If you're a ritual alcohol drinker, right, you have a glass of wine with your ritual at a particular moment. It's not that you're drunk all day long. Right?
You know what I'd like to see, though, is because you bring up some very interesting points about really bringing yourself to a certain point and using it with rituals and magic. I've never seen a ritual, let's just say, and they say, okay, fine, smoke this blunt right now. Take this bong, at this point, right before you do go into this meditation. I mean, I would like to see someone put together a ritual where is that they show you. I can understand, when you're burning incense and then maybe you put, a little pot in there and then, put your face in there. Okay, that's one thing, but I mean, most people out there aren't hands-free, musicians. Most people out there, need that instruction, and it would be nice for you to, write something up there like that, because I don't think that that's out there. There may be the psychology of it, but most people, I don't know for sure how they would actually include it in ritual. And that, of course, is your own personal thing that you do, which I am not going to ask you to demonstrate right now, of course. But, I'm sure most people who would like to get into it a little bit more for the heightened awareness and that connection, especially when you mentioned the Kundalini and the chakras, I'm quite sure they would like to understand exactly how to include that into the regime so they could actually come to that, that point. So you mentioned some great themes, and all your books, by the way, are fantastic, and you push the envelope, which is wonderful. So I'm really curious as to who will be a testament as to before and after and using cannabis within a ritual.
Well, I will certainly include some of that, some how-to in the book. There is some of it on the DVD as well. Again, there's, prior to our current age of the anti-drug thing that started happening in the 20th century, there was some common usage of cannabis in rituals. Probably the one that has really survived the most is in the context of rituals in India about the god Shiva, yes, for whom cannabis is sacred. Mm-hmm, and if you go to India, I've never been to India, but I've hung out with Indian people and Shiva sadhus here in the United States. There is really a ritual context to it. And for instance, it's much like toasting, where they would light up their spleef or their chillum. And the first thing you do is you hold it up and you praise Shiva. Right? There's a number of things you can say, Om Namaya Shiva, or Boom Boom Mahadev, which means Boom Boom Great God, and so on. And so there's a context or a frame that's placed on the experience, first of all, by doing that, by invoking Shiva prior to getting high, so that from that point on, every experience that you have from it, everything that the molecules are doing in your brain becomes connected with whatever ideas you have about Shiva and so on. You got to remember that in terms of India and the god Shiva, cannabis is it's central. When the world was formed, the drops of the amaret nectar fell to earth, and every place the drops fell, a cannabis plant grew. That's in the sacred writings of Hinduism. And Shiva gave the plants to mankind to produce joy and longevity, and so it's still very closely associated. And in fact, that's in India is where we see there's these mass rituals every year, special days for Shiva and for Ganesh and so on, yes, where everybody, millions of people drink bhang, which is a cannabis beverage. And it's just, it's the way that in the United States people drink eggnog at Christmas or have a beer on St. Patrick's Day or something. But over there, there's bhang. And millions of people all on the same day celebrate by drinking their glass of bhang. And,
I'm missing out. I'm really missing out.
Bhang is not. It's probably not quite as wildly psychoactive as going to California and smoking some strong medical marijuana there. It's more of kind of an energizing kind of experience. It's definitely psychoactive, but it's more kind of, it gives you like this energy and sense of well-being, which becomes associated with these day-long rituals that they have for Shiva and so on.
Well, and lastly, I'd like to comment on the medicinal purposes of marijuana, because I'm actually thinking that if it does become legalized, let's say nationwide across the United States, at some point they're going to take the pleasure out of something. You're not going to have people walking around smiling and having a good time and coming to the awareness. They're going to extract something to bring you down. And probably to addict you on it so you can, purchase it a lot. Is there a way that, or is there something that you could lend to, I guess, letting us know, you know, I don't know, how to keep it sacred. Is there a way, I mean, is there a way to actually keep it, you know, differentiate that from the medicine? Do you know of any laws that they're trying to pass where is that people can grow it on their own? Or do you know that it's only going to be via the pharmaceutical companies?
Permits are now relatively easy to obtain.
Card is printing. I'm going to give you this. This is your cultivation certificate, sir. If you choose to grow a garden, be sure to post a copy of that in plain sight in front of your garden.
There are hundreds of thousands of California citizens who can now legally purchase marijuana by simply obtaining a medical certificate. By presenting their personal card to any of the licensed dispensaries, anyone can bring home a few ounces of their favorite smoke or a portion of edibles such as pies, ice cream, or cookies, all infused with marijuana.
You got the ice cream?
The ice cream's in a lot of them. Those are all one dose apiece. And in general, the cakes and cookies here are made with more of an indica hybrid. And those go by dosage. The green label are single strength, the red are triple.
There are over 5,000 licensed dispensaries in California, and the need to supply them all has sparked a multi-million-dollar business across the state. Marijuana cultivation has literally replaced what used to be the #1 crop in California. Why?
Do you know that it's only going to be via the pharmaceutical companies?
Well, there's a mix of that in the United States right now. In Colorado, when they legalized it, people can grow their own.
Oh, they can. Okay, all right.
Yeah, they can grow, I believe, 4 plants. And if you know cannabis, that's a lot of cannabis.
Yeah, exactly.
A healthy plant could grow a pound of prime bud, which for most of us is a couple of years worth of.
Okay, all right. So what do they expect? What do they expect people to do by growing it on their own? I mean, what is the okay? Fine, you can grow your own, so you can actually get high all you want to. You can do whatever you like. Can you sell it?
I believe the law in Colorado is that you can give it to friends.
Okay.
I don't think you can, what you grow, I don't think you can sell it without a particular license to be a retail seller. That's a whole separate licensing thing. But you can give it to your friends.
You can give it to your friends. Now, can you, it is a natural substance coming from the earth. Can you actually give it to your 14-year-old? I mean, you give peppermint tea. You give peppermint.
I don't think so. I think that would probably be illegal. I don't really know the specifics of it, but
I see.
But much like giving alcohol to a minor.
I see. I see. So what do they expect for people to do with this? I mean, what I'm asking is this. You know, back in the day, there was bootlegs about the actual alcohol, and then now all of a sudden only liquor stores can sell it. And if you make some, you're thrown in jail because for whatever reason you're making money. Hopefully not poisoning yourselves. But at some point, there has to be a cutoff. And then in between legalizing it for prescriptions, I can almost rest assure you they're going to take out things. It's going to be totally different. You will not be able to induce it the way you do, the way many people enjoy doing it, because it's not going to be the same thing. And yet they're allowing it in Colorado. Is there a point that from behind the scenes that is actually going to be some type of midway?
Well, hopefully we'll find a middle path on there. You got to remember that this is a plant that it has accompanied the human race for thousands of years. Right. It will grow anywhere on the planet.
I've noticed that.
They grow it in Alaska, and so for somebody to grow a plant in their backyard with or without legal sanction is utterly simple, and people will always do that regardless. Also, the plant, because it has been bred by humans for thousands of years, it's a very varied plant, and there are medicinal strains that are specific for different. If you have glaucoma, there's a special strain that's grown to treat glaucoma.
Okay.
If you have asthma, there's some good strains that are good for asthma, and so on. And there are strains that traditionally were used ritually. There's some of those sativa strains from Nepal that the Shiva sadhus love, or the Jamaican strains that the Rastafarians use in their meditative practices. So there's always that choice, and we are going to see there's going to be lousy commercial pot out there, right? It's going to be like, here in America, we make fun of our beer because American beer is awful.
Yeah. But
we also have microbrews. We also have pubs and things that make their own beer, which is great. Or we can go to the store and buy some British beer, and so on. So there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of bad legal weed, corporate weed, whatever you want to call it. And they'll add garbage to it, and they'll take stuff out and so on. But there will always be a market for the sacred weed, the connoisseur weed, and the medical weed. And those are going to have to be under, the medical weed at least will have to be under some different kinds of regulations. Like we have with any other medicine, you need to know exactly what's in it. Right now, if you go into a marijuana dispensary in California or Washington or Colorado, all of the different strains in there will have a profile telling you what chemicals are in it, what cannabinoid chemicals and what aromatic terpene chemicals are in it. That way people can look at it and decide what it's going to be good for if they know a little bit about it, if it's going to be good for their asthma, if it's going to be good for their arthritis.
I see.
And so so similarly, there's the ones that we would look for sacred use as well, which would probably a little higher THC ones with some of the CBD and some of the other ones in smaller amounts, and some of the aromatic chemicals in it. There's one, for instance, linalool, which is also the active ingredient in lavender, which is found in some of the more interesting medicinal strains. So, lavender has a lot of interesting medicinal uses just from that aromatic thing. So some of those strains of cannabis would have similar ones in that way. So we would look for ones like that, and hopefully the laws will eventually have to address the labelings that you would know exactly what's in the strain. Whereas if it goes like tobacco, where there was nothing like that. They would put all kinds of garbage into cigarettes and have the worst kinds of cheap tobacco and so on, mixed with chemicals that make it burn longer and make people more addicted and things like that, without any kind of labeling, which was just awful. And we saw the damage that it did to a lot of people who got ill from that. Hopefully there'll be some middle ground where we will have good regulation over the kinds of things that are considered medical, and we'll also have enough choices so that if somebody wants to go buy cheap commercial pot, it's the same deal that we have now. You can go and go down to the park in your city and buy some crappy commercial pot, or if you have a special connection, or you live in a state where there's dispensaries and things like that, you could go and get something that's a more of a connoisseur or medicinal or whatever intent to it.
Well, I'd like to see some at some spiritual shops, that way, you can have it there and you can go based on the type of ritual that you want to, or the result that you want. That would be pretty interesting in itself, because I'm quite sure you just couldn't go to your doctor and say, look, I'm doing this ritual and I need this type of effect. It's just not going to work.
Well, not met my doctor, but anyway, I am actually, that's one of the projects I'm working on now. There's a lot of really interesting new analyses of the components of cannabis, which include, again, there's a range of about 60 different cannabinoid chemicals and another 30 or so different terpene chemicals, all of which are active to some degree. The project I'm working on now for the book is to get at least a kind of rudimentary Kabbalah out of that. Which chemicals fit where on the tree of life, and so on. So that you actually could kind of look at it and say, well, here's a strain that would be good for working in Hod, This is the strain that we're going to use to work in Tiferet today.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm working on that. We need a few more years of legalization and people reporting their usage and things before we could really get a full thing like that. But I'm kind of I at least want to have a general outline of that for the book.
You're a mad scientist. A mad magician scientist. I just tell you, I never thought in my wildest dreams something like that. And I'm very creative about my thought process, and you have topped my thoughts today. So with that, you're coming out with your book. How long will it be till you feel that you may be close to finishing it or publishing it?
Well, I've really only just gotten started on it over the last month or so. So a good magic book takes me a solid year to write. So,
I see.
So I look forward and then, given the way publishers work, it's probably another year before it's published. So we're probably about 2 years away from seeing it as a published book.
Well, I would love to hear some testimonials about, the effects and the various strains, just exactly how that turns out, because I think that would be quite interesting, because it'll give, I guess, new thought to, the tree, in reference to the Kabbalah and really turning everything, across the board and cross-checking, the responses that everyone gets and how it actually works. So that's going to be quite interesting. What else do you have going for you? What do you have anything coming up in the next couple months? We're already into May, and then it's going to be June and July, August. The year is halfway gone already. We just passed this, 12/12/21 or whatever the case may be, and so we're all here alive. Exactly. So, what's going on for you for the rest of the year?
Well, the rest of the year, my main focus is actually going to be writing the book.
I see. Okay, good.
I do have another round of NLP training, neuro-linguistic programming. We have a practitioner training coming up beginning at the end of this month, mainly for local people who are in the New York area, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. That'll be a weekend's training in advanced communication skills, rapport skills, using your language more effectively, and so on.
I see. Okay.
I don't have too much. I'm not doing. I don't think I'm going to be doing any magical festivals this summer. Usually I do at least a couple of them, but I'm going to take a year off from that. Probably in the fall there will be a magic workshop, at least maybe another NLP training. So people who want to find out or keep track of what I'm doing, they can go to metamagic.com, and there's usually a fairly recently updated list of what's going on there.
Yes, indeed. I noticed you do keep your site up pretty well, so that's excellent. I want to thank you for agreeing to be on the show. It's been really a topic that really will not it just won't go away. The governments all over the world, because America is passing it here and there from various states, until it's pretty much settled from how the pharmaceutical companies and how people, how it's going to be legalized. It's going to be a hot topic. So I think this is the best time for you to just go ahead and just start doing this, because you're going to get lots of people, wanting to know, how can they heighten what, they've been using for so long.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that maybe I can raise awareness a little bit, get people to think about it and to think in different categories about cannabis. That it's not this evil drug that the government has been telling us about for years. It's actually an ally of the human race that we've been using for thousands of years. That has quite a few health benefits and spiritual benefits as well, documented down through the ages. So if I can raise awareness on that a little bit, maybe it'll help keep the momentum going a little bit.
Well, you know what, and speaking on that last note, I have to say that most of the wars and things that do happen in this whole entire world has nothing to do with people just sitting around smoking pot. It's usually those people. It's usually those people in offices who claim they don't do anything, and they sit behind a desk and hit that little button there for someone to just go kill millions of people. So I have to say that I haven't seen in history that anyone has gone to war because they're freaking potheads. So with that, I have to say, let the peace be with everybody and spread the awareness so people can actually enjoy themselves and, what people want to do with their bodies and something coming natural from the earth shouldn't be regulated at all anyway. That's my personal opinion.
I agree with that. The ideal thing for me, if they would just remove it from any of the law books, and let people engage in commerce in it the way we would any other herb or, plants, trees, whatever it is. It's all pretty much the same to me. So people should do that, but we're not going to see that. The incentive in legalization is going to be about taxing it, and and people are going to have their fears addressed at least about people driving when they're high or kids getting it or whatever. So all that's going to have to be legislated before we see it legalized. Maybe down the road that could all get loosened up a little bit. But I think the only way that we're going to see it legalized is if the government is promised money. If they're promised some tax money. So that's where we're at now.
There's also too that element of what are the drug dealers going to do for a living now? If they're busy on the streets selling or doing whatever they do, the cartels and things like that. I mean, how are they going to fund their homes? So that's the other aspect as well. So many things to consider. But when you're dealing with it and ritual and magic, you're not hurting anybody. You're in your own space. And, what you do in your space is your business, and I'm all for that. So with that, I'd love to, welcome you back when you do have your book together, because it's going to be really, that's going to be a hot topic. Trust me. I can guarantee you on that one. Phil, it's like always, it's been a pleasure having you on, and all the best to you. Just stay as you are, and it's always on top.
Thanks, Mona. Always good to talk to you. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Wait a minute. Did you think that was it? How could you possibly think to have your ritual and to get your smoke on, that in the back of your mind, in your subconscious mind, that you wouldn't think, oh shit, at some point, I could possibly have someone in uniform ask me if I have a controlled substance in the house or within the area that you actually have your ritual. So I thought, let me see what I could possibly do to help everyone who may just have a little bit more weed on them than the normal person, especially if you're going to be doing it to induce certain enhancements to get you from, one point to the other. So I contacted Barry Cooper, who gave his blessings for me to use this clip that you're about to see.
If your grow room is large enough that you must pump heat out of your house, it's much safer to pump it into the floor and under the house if you have a pier and beam. This is impossible to do with a concrete slab, so pick a house that's pier and beam and run the vents under the house. This causes the heat to spread out and it cannot be detected by FLIR. If you're using the really hot lights like the mercury halide or the high pressure sodium, you can actually have 1,000 watt light in a room, and that heat will spread throughout the entire house and FLIR cannot pick it up. The idea is to spread the heat throughout your house much like a heater does in the wintertime. FLIR cannot detect that. It's the concentration of heat that FLIR detects. If you have a small grow box in your house or you're growing in a closet, the heat generated from the lights can easily be vented into the rest of the house, again avoiding FLIR detection. Another great idea, if you must pump heat out of your house, is to pump the heat through your clothes dryer vent. Then if FLIR cameras get around your house, it simply looks like you're drying a load of clothes. Another guaranteed method you can use to ensure the footage of a FLIR camera doesn't show up on a search warrant affidavit is to grow using fluorescent lights and LED lights. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding the quality of the bud when a grower uses fluorescents, but I've interviewed at least 50 growers, and at least half of them tell me you can grow a good quality bud using a high-powered fluorescent lights referred to as the T5s. Fluorescent lights use very little electricity and they generate almost zero heat. So using these type of lights ensures no heat, therefore no FLIR imaging.
Okay, maybe it was over the top, but just remember, when you do use cannabis, be responsible and use it wisely.